As the originator of the language of work, it is my pleasure to orient you to the work formula by way of our signature 10-minute teach. Through this orientation, you can quickly see how to define and improve work at all levels of the business. Applying what you learn will make a difference in yourself, your colleagues, and your place of work. I wish you much success.
Welcome to the 10-Minute Teach, our way of orienting you to the work formula of the language of work. The 10-Minute Teach will introduce the 6 systemic elements of the work formula. The work formula is a way to represent, or model if you will, in 6 words, the basic elements that comprise work at various levels and layers of a business. While it's true that each of us readily understands these 6 words, we need to see their relationship to one another. Then we can put them in a context that will lead to shared understanding and use in meeting a variety of business needs. The 6 words of the work formula may be thought of in 2 parts. The first 3, inputs, process steps, and outputs, represent a classic manufacturing way of looking at work, much the way Henry Ford used in producing cars. In planning work, Ford had to obtain many inputs, use a new set of process steps, now known as the assembly line, to produce cars as outputs. To these 3 elements of work, we add conditions, consequences, and feedback to make work more complete in today's business context. We will illustrate the 6 elements that comprise work using a sports analogy, American football. The level of work we shall initially illustrate is the playing of the game of football, which is a core process. This is not the jobs, work groups, or the business unit level of work. We will use the 6 elements from the work formula in the same order work should be modeled. We always begin by first defining the outputs. Outputs are the deliverables of work. They are the tangible products and services we provide or produce for our customers or clients. In the playing of football, one of the outputs is a touchdown. A touchdown occurs when the ball is passed or carried into the opponent's end zone. Other outputs include the extra point, field goal, safety, and touchback. Thus, everyone can agree that there are 5 outputs to playing football. When you model your own work or that of others, you will want to obtain agreement as to the outputs first. Next are the inputs of work. Inputs are of 2 basic kinds, resources and triggers. The resources needed to play football are pretty obvious. You need players, uniforms, a ball, a variety of plays, and so forth. Other inputs, called triggers, initiate the work. In football, this includes the referee blowing the whistle, the time clock, the quarterback calling a play, etc. In business, inputs generally include resources such as the budget, workers, equipment, software, and so forth. Triggers, on the other hand, include client requests, management directives, schedules, or deadlines, among others. Next are the conditions of work. These are simply the rules and regulations that must be followed in doing work. Another word for conditions is governances. Usually, there are both internal and external conditions. In football, the internal conditions are the playbook the team employs and its philosophy of being a running or passing team or both. Then there are external conditions. In professional football, the external conditions are the rules imposed by the National Football League, the governing body. In business, conditions are the laws, rules, and regulations imposed by federal, state, and local governments and other governing bodies. Internal conditions include, among others, the policy manual. Next is the identification of consequences. Consequences are the value-added results the organization desires to achieve by producing the outputs. In football, it means the scores that lead to winning or even tying the game. We never list negative consequences, since no one should work to achieve negative results. In business, consequences would include things like customer satisfaction, profit, ROI, and so on. The 5th element of work is process steps. Process steps are the procedures that are followed to produce or achieve each output. For example, the team follows a number of prescribed plays to produce the output, a touchdown. In business, typical process steps are expressed in terms of mini deliverables by words such as identify, obtain, select, review, and so forth. Finally, there is the work element known as feedback. Feedback includes the sources of communication helpful in producing quality work and that let us know we have successfully completed it. During the play of the game, there is feedback from coaches, other players, and so forth that help play the game successfully. We call this during feedback. The other kind of feedback we call after feedback. For example, you know you've scored a touchdown when the referee signals so by raising his arms above his head. Thus, there is feedback both during and after work. In business, feedback sources include management, customers, reports, auditors, and so forth. You now see that we have described a complex piece of work, the playing of football, which is a core process, applying the 6 elements of work. We will use the same 6-word formula to model other levels of work, including jobs, work groups, and the business unit. Let's look first at using the work formula to model jobs. In this instance, we will display the job model of a quarterback, one of the many positions or jobs in football. First, you see the outputs for the job. Then, use of certain inputs, adherence to given conditions, to attain positive consequences, using a variety of process steps, aided by different kinds of feedback. This gives everyone a picture of the work this job entails, and the work formula can be used successfully to model your job as well, although we recommend more detail in a template we will provide. Next, it's also possible to define work groups such as the defense with the work formula, noting again outputs, inputs, and so on. Finally, but preferably first in fact, it is possible to model the business unit, which is a representation of the company's work as a whole. In American football, the business unit is known as the franchise. Note how it is possible to define again the outputs, inputs, conditions, consequences, process steps, and feedback at a high level for everyone to see. The use of the work formula at different levels means we can align the intended work of the business unit with its core processes, jobs, and work groups. We sometimes refer to this simply as the what, how, who, and organization of the work in a business. As an aid to your work in modeling various levels of work in business, we have summarized each of the 6 elements of work, provided a definition, listed some typical sources and the types. You may want to have this page available in front of you as you define each element of work. It is important to note that your modeling of work be done in the following order. First, outputs, followed by inputs, conditions, consequences, process steps, and finally feedback. With this new orientation to what work is, you will be able to model your work and that of others to achieve shared understanding. Based on decades of our use, we know you will find the work formula insightful, productive, and rewarding.